Tom pulled into the hotel parking lot, his luxury car a stark contrast to the rustic surroundings of the Catskill Mountains. He checked his watch, a mixture of excitement and anxiety coursing through him. This isolated spot was perfect for his clandestine meeting with Sarah. As he grabbed his overnight bag, a sense of power washed over him. He had mastered the art of juggling his dual life, successful executive and serial adulterer. The hotel lobby was quiet, with only a bored receptionist to witness his arrival. Tom collected his room key, forcing himself to act casual despite his racing heart. In the elevator, he loosened his tie, trying to shake off the corporate persona and embrace his role as Sarah's lover. Entering the room, Tom's eyes were immediately drawn to the large, ornate mirror dominating one wall. Its antique frame seemed out of place in the otherwise modern setting. He shrugged off the odd feeling it gave him and began preparing for Sarah's arrival. Sarah entered the room like a burst of energy. Young, ambitious, and strikingly beautiful, she embodied everything Tom felt was missing from his life. She embraced him passionately, her enthusiasm momentarily pushing away his lingering concerns about his wife Lisa. As they settled in, Tom poured 2 glasses of wine, hoping to calm his nerves. Sarah chatted animatedly about her latest art project, but Tom found his mind wandering. He couldn't shake the image of Lisa at home, trusting and unaware. Suddenly, a movement in the mirror caught Tom's eye. A shadow seemed to flicker across its surface, sending an inexplicable chill down his spine. He blinked, and the moment passed. Dismissing it as a trick of the light, Tom turned his attention back to Sarah, determined to enjoy their stolen moments together. Little did Tom know that this seemingly ordinary mirror would soon become the catalyst for unraveling the carefully constructed lies of his double life. The atmosphere in the hotel room shifted abruptly as Tom's phone rang, its harsh tone cutting through the romantic ambience. Tom's face tightened as he recognized the ringtone, reserved for urgent work matters. He glanced at Sarah apologetically before answering, his voice transforming into the confident timbre of a seasoned executive. "Emergency board meeting," Tom mouthed to Sarah, who nodded understanding and quietly moved to the far corner of the room. Tom's mind raced as he set up his laptop for the video call. He hadn't anticipated work intruding on his carefully planned rendezvous, and the sudden collision of his 2 worlds sent a jolt of panic through him. As the video conference connected, Tom plastered on a neutral expression, hoping his colleagues wouldn't notice the hotel room backdrop. The meeting began with the usual formalities, but Tom struggled to focus. His eyes kept darting to Sarah's reflection in the mirror, paranoid that she might accidentally enter the frame. The board members droned on about quarterly reports and market projections. Tom offered perfunctory responses, his usual sharp business acumen dulled by the stress of the situation. He loosened his collar, feeling sweat begin to form on his brow. Suddenly, the antique mirror behind Tom flared with an inexplicable brightness. The light seemed to pulsate for a moment, capturing a clear image of Sarah in her compromising position. Tom, oblivious to this supernatural occurrence, continued his practiced act of the dedicated company man. As the meeting progressed, Tom's tension mounted. The mirror's strange behavior persisted, its surface seeming to ripple and shift. Sarah, sensing the unease in the room, huddled further into her corner, unwittingly positioning herself for another potential exposure. Tom wrapped up his part of the discussion, eager to end the call and return to his illicit encounter. But as he prepared to sign off, a new voice joined the conference, one that made his blood run cold. His wife, Lisa, had unexpectedly joined the meeting, promotion granting her access to this high-level discussion. With Lisa now on the call, Tom's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. The mirror behind him continued its eerie display, setting the stage for a revelation that would shatter Tom's double life in spectacular fashion. Lisa's face appeared on the screen, her smile radiating confidence from her recent promotion. Tom's heart rate spiked as he struggled to maintain his composure. The juxtaposition of his wife's trusting expression and Sarah's hidden presence in the room was almost too much to bear. As Lisa began to speak about her new role, Tom's eyes darted nervously between the screen and the room around him. He nodded mechanically, barely registering her words. Suddenly, a collective gasp from the other participants snapped Tom's attention back to the call. Horror dawned on Tom's face as he realized what had happened. The mirror behind him, inexplicably active, had reflected Sarah's image clearly enough for everyone on the video call to see. The young artist, unaware of her exposure, had shifted position, coming into full view of the supernatural mirror. The board meeting erupted into chaos. Hushed whispers and shocked expressions filled the screens as Tom's colleagues processed the scene unfolding before them. Some averted their eyes, while others leaned in, morbidly fascinated by the scandal playing out in real time. Lisa's voice cut through the commotion, sharp with disbelief and growing anger. "Tom, what's going on? Who is that woman?" Her words hung in the air, demanding an explanation that Tom couldn't provide. Panic seized Tom as he scrambled for a plausible excuse. His mind raced, but every potential lie seemed woefully inadequate in the face of such damning evidence. He opened his mouth to speak, but only incoherent stammers came out. The other board members began to murmur among themselves, their professional demeanor cracking under the weight of the unfolding drama. Some began to question not just Tom's personal integrity, but his professional conduct as well. As the situation spiraled out of control, Tom felt the foundations of his carefully crafted life begin to crumble. His career, his marriage, his reputation, everything he had built was now teetering on the brink of destruction, all because of one reflected image in an ancient, inexplicable mirror. The disaster of revelation was complete, and Tom knew that nothing would ever be the same again. As the chaos of the video call continued, Tom's phone began to vibrate incessantly. Glancing down, his face paled as he saw a flood of notifications pouring in. Somehow, compromising messages were being sent to everyone in his contact list, revealing secrets he had long kept hidden. Tom's fingers fumbled as he tried to stop the barrage of texts and emails. Each message exposed a different facet of his duplicitous life, details of his affair with Sarah, questionable business dealings, and lies he had told to cover his tracks. The phone seemed to have a mind of its own, bypassing all security measures and unleashing a torrent of truth. Panic rising, Tom watched helplessly as his carefully constructed world unraveled. Colleagues on the video call were now openly discussing the messages they were receiving, their shocked voices adding to the cacophony of accusation and disbelief. In a desperate attempt to regain control, Tom tried to access his banking apps, hoping to transfer funds or freeze accounts. To his horror, he discovered that his financial accounts were already being locked due to suspicious activity. Years of hidden transactions and questionable money movements were suddenly laid bare, triggering automatic security protocols. On the video call, Lisa's expression had transformed from confusion to cold fury. She had received the messages too, each one a dagger to their marriage. "How could you, Tom?" she demanded, her voice trembling with rage and hurt. Tom could only watch, mute and powerless, as years of deception crashed down around him. Sarah, now fully aware of the unfolding catastrophe, began gathering her things. The look she gave Tom was a mixture of disgust and pity. She had believed herself special, but now realized she was just another pawn in Tom's game of deceit. As the messages continued to spread, reaching friends, family, and business associates, Tom felt the last vestiges of his reputation crumbling. Each ping of his phone signaled another relationship damaged, another trust broken. The technology he had once used to facilitate his double life had turned against him, becoming the instrument of his downfall. In the span of mere minutes, Tom's world had been turned upside down. The truth, so long suppressed, was now irrepressibly free, leaving him exposed and vulnerable to the consequences of his actions. As the video call descended into chaos, Tom made a desperate attempt to salvage his relationship with Lisa. His words, once smooth and persuasive, now came out in stutters and half-formed excuses. But with each attempt to explain, the ancient mirror seemed to pulsate, casting an eerie glow that highlighted the lies in his words. Lisa, her face a mask of pain and betrayal, listened in stony silence. The trust that had been the foundation of their marriage was visibly crumbling. Tom's pleas for understanding fell on deaf ears as Lisa's eyes hardened with each passing moment. The connection between them, both emotional and digital, was fraying rapidly. Meanwhile, Sarah stood in the background, a silent witness to the destruction of Tom's carefully crafted facade. The allure that had drawn her to this married man was fading fast, replaced by a growing sense of shame and regret. She began to see Tom not as the powerful, charming executive he had portrayed himself to be, but as a pathetic figure drowning in his own deceit. As Tom's attention ping-ponged between the video call and Sarah, he saw the young artist gathering her belongings. Their eyes met briefly, and Tom was struck by the coldness in her gaze. The passion that had brought them together had evaporated, leaving only bitter disappointment. Sarah moved towards the door, pausing only to say, "This was a mistake. All of it." Her words cut through the room, adding another layer to Tom's humiliation. Before he could respond, she was gone, the door closing behind her with a final, damning click. Desperate, Tom tried to call Sarah's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. He sent frantic text messages, all of which remained unanswered. The realization hit him hard. Sarah had cut him off completely, leaving him to face the consequences of their affair alone. As the video call continued, Tom found himself increasingly isolated. His colleagues' faces showed a mix of shock, disappointment, and in some cases, a hint of schadenfreude. Lisa, still connected but emotionally distant, watched with a detached air as her husband's life unraveled before her eyes. Tom, once the master of juggling his double life, now stood alone in the hotel room. The connections he had so carefully maintained with his wife, his lover, his colleagues, were breaking one by one, leaving him adrift in a sea of his own making. As the video call continued its downward spiral, Lisa excused herself, her voice cold and controlled. She needed time to process the shock of Tom's betrayal. In the privacy of her home office, Lisa's composed facade crumbled, giving way to a mix of anger, hurt, and determination. Taking a deep breath, Lisa reached for her phone and dialed a number she never thought she'd use. On the other end, Tom's former rival and Lisa's longtime mentor answered. His voice was grave as Lisa recounted the events of the video call. "I always suspected Tom wasn't the man he claimed to be," the mentor said, his words tinged with a mix of sympathy and vindication. "It's time you dig deeper, Lisa. For your own sake." Fueled by a combination of rage and a desire for truth, Lisa began her investigation. She started with Tom's financial records, which she had access to as his wife. At first glance, everything seemed normal, but as she delved deeper, discrepancies began to emerge. Hidden accounts, unexplained transfers, and suspicious transactions painted a picture of financial deceit that went far beyond a simple affair. Lisa's fingers flew across her keyboard as she followed the trail of Tom's lies. Each discovery was a fresh wound, but it also strengthened her resolve. She uncovered evidence of kickbacks, embezzlement, and fraudulent deals that Tom had carefully concealed from both her and the company. As the extent of Tom's deception became clear, Lisa felt a strange mix of emotions. There was pain, certainly, but also a growing sense of empowerment. For years, she had lived in Tom's shadow, believing in the perfect life he had constructed. Now, as that illusion shattered, Lisa found herself standing on her own, stronger than she had ever been. In a moment of quiet reflection, Lisa thought back on her marriage. She remembered the late nights, the missed anniversaries, the vague explanations that she had accepted without question. How long had she been blind to the truth? And more importantly, had she been complicit in her own deception? These thoughts led Lisa to a difficult question. Was she willing to fight for a marriage built on such a foundation of lies? The answer, she realized, was forming even as she asked herself the question. The Lisa who had entered this day was gone, replaced by a woman who was no longer willing to live in blissful ignorance. As night fell, Lisa sat surrounded by the evidence of Tom's duplicity. She had a decision to make, one that would shape the rest of her life. With a deep breath, she picked up her phone, ready to set in motion the events that would bring Tom's house of cards tumbling down. Tom returned home late that night, his mind racing with desperate plans to salvage his crumbling life. He found Lisa waiting for him in the living room, her posture rigid and eyes cold. The tension in the air was palpable as Tom realized this would be the confrontation that would determine his fate. "Lisa, I can't explain," Tom began, his voice lacking its usual confidence. But Lisa cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Save it, Tom. I know everything," she said, her voice steady and filled with barely contained anger. "The affair, the financial fraud, all of it." Tom's face paled as he realized the extent of Lisa's knowledge. He had underestimated her, a mistake that was now proving fatal to his carefully constructed world. "I thought I could manipulate the situation, make you believe my side of the story," Tom admitted, his facade finally cracking. "But I see now that's impossible." Lisa stood up, her presence somehow filling the room. "You're right, it is impossible. I'm not the naive wife you can fool anymore, Tom. I've seen the real you, and I'm done living this lie." As Tom struggled to find words, Lisa continued, laying out the evidence she had uncovered. Each revelation was another nail in the coffin of their marriage and Tom's career. "I've already spoken to the board," Lisa revealed, causing Tom's eyes to widen in shock. "They're convening an emergency meeting tomorrow. Your days at the company are numbered." Tom's mind raced, trying to find a way out, but he knew he was cornered. His usual tricks and lies wouldn't work anymore. "What do you want, Lisa?" Tom asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want the truth, Tom. All of it. "And then I want you out of my life," Lisa replied, her voice firm and unwavering. As the night wore on, Tom found himself confessing to years of deceit. With each admission, he felt his power slipping away. Lisa listened in silence, her expression a mix of disgust and pity. By dawn, Tom's world had been completely dismantled. Lisa had made it clear that she was leaving him, taking with her not just her love and trust, but also the connections and influence that had propelled Tom's career. As Tom watched Lisa prepare to leave for the board meeting, he realized that this was the final confrontation, not just with his wife, but with the consequences of his actions. The man who had once felt invincible now stood alone, facing a future stripped of all he had valued. The following morning, Tom found himself driving to the company headquarters, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The emergency board meeting loomed ahead, a final judgment on his career and reputation. As he navigated through traffic, Tom's phone buzzed incessantly. News of his indiscretions had spread like wildfire through the corporate grapevine. Colleagues, once eager to curry his favor, now sent messages of disbelief and thinly veiled contempt. Tom ignored them all, focusing on the road ahead and the faint hope that he might still salvage something from this disaster. Pulling into the company parking lot, Tom was met with a sea of stares from employees arriving for work. Whispers followed him as he made his way to the elevator, the weight of their judgment pressing down on him with each step. In the elevator, Tom caught his reflection in the mirrored walls. The man staring back at him was a far cry from the confident executive of just days ago. His eyes were sunken, his suit wrinkled, and the aura of success that once surrounded him had vanished. As the elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, Tom was hit with a wave of anxiety. The corridor to the boardroom seemed to stretch endlessly before him. With each step, memories of his past triumphs in that very room flashed through his mind, now tainted by the reality of his impending downfall. Approaching the boardroom, Tom heard muffled voices from within. He recognized Lisa's voice, steady and authoritative, already presenting to the board. The realization that his own wife was now instrumental in his professional demise sent a chill down his spine. Tom paused at the door, his hand hovering over the handle. For a brief moment, he considered turning around, fleeing from the consequences of his actions. But he knew there was nowhere to run. His carefully constructed world had already crumbled around him. Taking a deep breath, Tom steeled himself and pushed open the door. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. The faces of his colleagues, once friendly and respectful, now showed a mix of disappointment, anger, and in some cases, a hint of pity. At the head of the table sat Lisa, flanked by her mentor and the company's legal team. The evidence of Tom's misdeeds was displayed on the large screen behind him, leaving no room for denial or excuses. As Tom took his seat, the weight of his actions finally hit him full force. The chaos he had unleashed through years of deception and selfishness had come full circle, and now he would face the consequences in front of those he had betrayed the most. The boardroom air was thick with tension as Tom took his seat. The once familiar faces around the table now seemed like a jury ready to pass sentence. Lisa, composed and professional, continued her presentation without acknowledging Tom's arrival. As I was saying, Lisa's voice cut through the silence. The evidence of financial misconduct is irrefutable. She clicked through slides detailing Tom's fraudulent activities, each one a damning indictment of his character and professional ethics. Tom's colleagues listened intently, their expressions a mix of shock and growing anger. He could see years of trust and respect evaporating before his eyes. Some avoided his gaze entirely, while others stared at him with undisguised contempt. When Lisa finished her presentation, the room erupted into a flurry of questions. Board members demanded explanations, their voices rising with each revelation. Tom tried to interject, to offer some defense, but his words fell flat against the mountain of evidence. "Tom," the board chairman finally addressed him directly, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" All eyes turned to Tom. He stood slowly, his legs unsteady beneath him. As he opened his mouth to speak, he caught sight of Lisa. The pain and betrayal in her eyes struck him harder than any accusation from his colleagues. Tom began, his usual eloquence deserting him. "I have no excuse for my actions. I betrayed the trust of this company, my colleagues, and—" He paused, looking at Lisa, "my family." His admission seemed to deflate the anger in the room, replacing it with a somber acknowledgement of the tragedy unfolding before them. The board members exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. The chairman cleared his throat. In light of these revelations, the board has no choice but to terminate your employment, effective immediately. Furthermore, we will be freezing all your company assets pending a full investigation. Tom nodded, accepting the inevitable. As the chairman continued to outline the legal ramifications of his actions, Tom's gaze drifted to Lisa. She sat straight-backed, her eyes forward, but he could see the slight trembling of her hands, the only outward sign of the emotional turmoil she must be feeling. As the meeting concluded, Tom found himself stripped of his title, his power, and his reputation. The board filed out, leaving him alone with Lisa and her mentor. In the empty boardroom, the full weight of his judgment settled upon him. Lisa finally turned to face him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I hope it was worth it, Tom," she said softly, before gathering her things and walking out of the room and out of his life. Tom stood alone in the boardroom, the place where he had once commanded respect and wielded power. Now, it felt like a courtroom where the final gavel had fallen, sentencing him to face the consequences of his actions. In the aftermath of Tom's downfall, Lisa emerged as a force to be reckoned with. No longer content to be a silent victim, she channeled her pain and anger into action. Her newly acquired position on the board gave her the platform she needed to ensure Tom faced the full consequences of his actions. Lisa worked tirelessly with the company's legal team, providing them with all the evidence she had uncovered. She was determined that Tom's misdeeds would not be swept under the rug or dismissed as a simple indiscretion. Her intimate knowledge of Tom's affairs, both personal and professional, proved invaluable in building a case against him. As the days passed, Lisa found an unlikely ally in Sarah. The young artist, feeling used and betrayed by Tom, reached out to Lisa. Initially hesitant, Lisa agreed to meet her. Over coffee, the two women discovered a shared desire for justice and a need to reclaim their narratives. Together, Lisa and Sarah began to piece together a complete picture of Tom's deceptions. Sarah provided details of Tom's personal life that corroborated the financial irregularities Lisa had uncovered. Their collaboration became a powerful testimony against Tom's character and actions. Lisa's mentor, watching her transformation with pride, encouraged her to take on a more prominent role in the company. "You've shown incredible strength and integrity," he told her. "The board needs someone like you to help rebuild trust." As the legal proceedings against Tom gained momentum, Lisa found herself at the center of a much larger movement within the company. She became an advocate for transparency and ethical business practices, using her experience to push for systemic changes. Tom, meanwhile, watched from the sidelines as his world continued to crumble. Attempts to reach out to Lisa or Sarah were met with silence. His former colleagues shunned him, and his professional network disintegrated. The man who once thought himself untouchable now faced a future of isolation and legal battles. In a final act of reclaiming her power, Lisa held a press conference. Standing tall before a sea of reporters, she spoke not as a victim, but as a survivor and a leader. She outlined the changes being implemented in the company and her commitment to fostering a culture of integrity. As Lisa concluded her speech, her eyes fell on the antique mirror that had been moved to the conference room, the very mirror that had set these events in motion. For a moment, she thought she saw it shimmer, as if acknowledging its role in revealing the truth. Lisa left the podium to thunderous applause, her head held high. She had turned her pain into purpose, betrayal into strength. As she walked out of the building, Lisa realized that this wasn't just about revenge against Tom. It was about reclaiming her own story and paving the way for a future built on honesty and integrity. The story of Tom's downfall and Lisa's rise became a cautionary tale in corporate circles, a reminder that in a world of smoke and mirrors, the truth will always find a way to reflect itself.